CGTN. See the difference. Welcome back to the program. Ghana is planning to issue green and social bonds worth up to $2 billion by November. Now, this would make it the first African country to sell debt in order to fund development programs. A social bond essentially is a debt instrument used to raise funds for projects with positive social outcomes, like investing in education, healthcare, food security, that sort of thing. Its issuance is on an upward trajectory around the world as investors try to combine the need to make a profit but also a mission to tackle inequalities. This type of bond reached record levels last year, increasing sevenfold in terms of issuance. This year, it's expected to grow by at least 6% to $150 billion being raised in that space. The African Development Bank, for one, has been active in that space. It launched a social bond program in 2017. To date, it's issued 5 such bonds. The latest one was a $3 billion debt instrument designed to raise funds for fighting COVID-19. Let's dig into the details of Ghana's push into both green and social bonds. Paul Frimpong is a global markets research analyst at CGI's Finance and Investment Sense. He joins us now on the line from Accra in Ghana. Thank you for your time this evening. So, do we know what the proceeds of these social bonds will be used for? But just as important, do we know what price Ghana is targeting?
Yes, good evening and thank you for having me. I think what the government is doing through the finance ministry is to leverage on the various opportunities that are available to be able to meet its expenditure needs for the year. And beginning of the year, the 2021 budget, the government got approval from Parliament to raise $5 billion from the international markets. Already the government has raised about $3 billion through the issuance of Eurobond. And I think it's trying to raise this $2 billion through the green and social bond in November. As of now, the price at which the government will be paying for this bond is not known yet. I think they're still gathering the team, and the purpose is that by November of this year, which is in the fall, they should have gone to the market to raise this green bond to become the first country in Sub-Saharan Africa to do so.
Indeed, but given the price that we're looking at here, you know, the cedi has weakened drastically against the American dollar, 5.9 to the greenback today on the interbank market. This essentially is a record low. Is it prudent for the country to be getting into the market and procuring more dollar-denominated debt?
Well, I think one of the key areas that the government look at when they are trying to borrow from international market, of course, is the issue about the local currency. So obviously, each time it's able to borrow in the international market, I mean, in a foreign-denominated currency, locally it helps to stabilize the local currency, which has been very weakening against the major currency, especially the US dollar. So I think that has been the wisdom. So, and also when you borrow locally, I think in a way you indirectly compete with the local businesses. So it's always advisable that you have the chance, and if you have the good economic indicators, that will make you to borrow from international market at a very competitive rate, then it's advisable you do so. Because in there, you'll be able to bring home a foreign currency that can show up your local currency.
Indeed, and avoid crowding out the local market as well. Do we know if any of the proceeds of these bonds would go into buying up vaccines beyond what the country is committed to acquire through COVAX?
Actually, I mean, Ghana is in a very tight situation when it comes to the COVID-19 vaccine. I mean, I think earlier on when they received the free doses through the COVAX agreements, I think it's been very difficult for the government to continue the vaccination program. And look at the rationale behind the raising of this $5 billion. I think $3.5 billion of it is going to refinance already mature debt, and it's only $1.5 billion that is going to go into investment, and most of this is going to social investment. I think one of the areas the government is looking to make sure it's very sustainable is its flagship educational program called the Free Senior High School. I think that is where most of these funds that they're going to raise will go into, of course, as well as other health-related activities.
Indeed. One last question for you. So the finance minister also says that the country aims to raise its tax to GDP ratio up to 28%. Now, that's way above the sub-Saharan average, around 16.5%. In fact, it's much closer to South Africa. But how will that be achieved?
Yes, I think this government has been very, very focused on the digitalization agenda. So There's so many initiatives that they've introduced, and all in the aid of trying to see how we can bring more people into the tax bracket. Because as it stands now, always government has been falling short on its tax revenue targets. And so what they've done is that over the period, they've invested strategically using technology. So one of the key elements you've seen that even Ghana became the first country in Sub-Saharan Africa to introduce the mobile money interoperability. They've introduced a digital addressing system, and now they've introduced the national identification number, which originally used to serve as an identity for Ghanaians, now has been converted to tax ID number. So essentially, the government has moved the people paying the tax to about $15.5 million people. Of course, this does not necessarily mean that everybody is going to pay tax. Of course, you need to look at the productive people, those who are actually engaged in productive economic activities. And that
but
is
this
where
certainly
we can
does
actually
make
see
it much harder. But this
be able
does
to
make
get-
it much harder for people to essentially try and to dodge paying their taxes, doesn't it? It expands the net.
Indeed. But then again, we have to look at the productive side of it. Out of the 15.5 million people that are going to be paying tax because of this new identification number that has been converted to tax number, how many of them are engaged economically? I think those are the nitty-gritties that we'll have to look at to be able to convince that indeed we can move the tax revenue to 28% of GDP.
All right, we'll leave it there for the time being. Paul Frimpong, Global Markets Research Analyst at CGI's Finance and Investment Center. Thank you very much for your time this evening.